And in the 70s, I got active around nuclear power plants they were planning to build on Lake Ontario. And had just come out of a graduate program. I'd done my thesis on puppetry. I had all these puppets. And a crew of us got together and wrote Jack and the Power Plant. And it was a fabulous anti-nuke puppet show that we did at the state fair. We'd take on rallies. And it was really just this kind of very fun, creative way to tell a story about nuclear power and solar power and who's in charge here. And that work, I was also working at the Syracuse Peace Council, and at some point was working on the peace calendars. And in 1982, we were doing the Disarmament Now peace calendar, and we were just beginning to hear about Greenham, but we were celebrating women's peace encampments around the world. And there were these little pictures and stories about women gathering at the missile silos in different places that U.S. government interests had put throughout Europe a while ago. And I think then started getting information about the Greenham Women's Peace Encampment there, and we decided to dedicate the next calendar to Can't Kill the Spirit, and organized local women here to make a patch. We'll make a quilt, and we will honor the work that the women are doing through women's art. And it was my job to organize the 30, 40 women to make these little squares. And I'd been doing cultural work a little bit, but all of a sudden I was out there going door to door, talking politics with other women and getting all of these patches together and making this quilt. And it was kind of this, from a distance, work with the Women's Peace Encampment. It was something I knew about, appreciated. I had close friends that were actively going over there. But in the 80s, I was a worker-owner at a small whole-grain bakery in Syracuse, On the Rise Baked Goods, and also running a small organic farm in Jamesville. So it was kind of very rooted in community here, but was just fascinated at the gathering of energy there, the people committed to it, and being able to do the support work with it. So for many years, people before they went to Seneca Army Depot would come by the bakery, take all the old bread, knowing that it was like kind of going exactly where it was supposed to go. And it was kind of a cool experience like that. I think during that period too, another story that was happening is a neighbor's friend was in the National Guard, Woody. And we'd gotten to know Woody, and he was going to buy our car. And I remember one weekend he was over, and he had just gotten deployed to the Seneca Army Depot, and he was petrified. And it wasn't a guy I knew very well, but he was a weekend National Guard guy, and a pamphlet, the Peace Encampment had put out a pamphlet, an information pamphlet, what to do when you're there, why we're here, background information, maps, it was some kind of little pamphlet. And he was petrified of going over there. And it was like, what do you expect to find? I think, wouldn't you be more scared about what's on the other side of the fence? What are they doing there? And I was so happy to sit and talk with him. His fear was just of the unknown. He had no idea. It was so scary from a distance, and he was just going to be kind of put up against all these women, and he didn't know where they were coming from. And I was so happy to just be able to have the transparency of going, here's the book, read about it. It's a cool thing. You should be happy half the women in the world are worrying about the future, and I think it kind of eased him a bit, and it was nice to have that boundary, to be able to cross and to be transparent in it and clear. It was a nice experience.
Well, tell us more about the quilt.
So the quilt was, I was working with Syracuse culture workers, and we chose it as the artwork that would be on the cover of our calendar. And I know for me, I made one patch that was, Seneca Army Depot here. It was a little map of the world, and Seneca Army Depot here, and Greenham peace encampment here and this little swirl going, everything is connected. And I loved the thinking. I thought it was such a paradigm shift when women, well, where's this stuff coming from? Well, let's go upstream. Well, and following the trail backwards, and getting to deeper roots of where the uranium or whatever it was in the silos, or where were these things being built, and to keep just exposing this invisible militarism in our culture that was pretty much kind of omnipresent but invisible. So made visible, kind of, and, to buy the little farm next door and have this kind of legal presence there to just be loud from. It was fabulous.
Did you do some of the puppetry stuff at the camp?
No, I had no, I wasn't active that way there.
Uh-huh.
And continued to go on using hand puppets, but not doing puppet shows.
Yeah.
I was coming to it as an artist and craftsperson and kind of forgetting that it's theater, so having 10 puppets on stage talking to each other was not good theater. We made lots of important points, but we didn't, I do remember feeling bad that I couldn't make the same commitment other people were making to being there, and that I think we get callings in our life. I remember once something was happening with the Hopis and the Dene in New Mexico, and there was this feeling of, I must go, and that they need me, Years later I heard that too many people came. It was a mess, don't come, go solve your own problems. But there was a part of me that wanted to drop everything I'm doing, to commit to doing the hard work I think it does to change systems. And I'd already made commitments to organic farming and to worker ownership and cooperatives, and there was this transforming work that to me was not as dramatic but as important. And in lieu of being able to go and stay a month or commit energy and time to it, instead that energy kind of internalized a little bit, because I remember thinking very strongly we were going to have a family reunion, and it was we should meet at the gates of the Seneca Army Depot, you guys. This is where the world comes to an end, and this is where the beginning is. And only as go and just honor it in whatever way we can, in a way that it's part of this country we live in. What is this? Or question it, or think about it, or do it as a family in solidarity. Kind of instead of going on a family reunion thing, let's go there. It's kind of like wanting to get them to help me get there, maybe too, in some way, and not to be part of any big protest, but just to look through the gates. And we never did it. We didn't do it. But it was one of these kind of very passionate, this is what I need to do. Maybe in my head I did it.
Yeah.
Maybe it became a story I told about wanting to do it,
Uh-huh.
Maybe I did something else instead. But it was a very, like going to the gates of hell, just to look in and just see how bad it is.
So did you get to the encampment?
Yeah, I went over probably 2 or 3 times.
Uh-huh.
Once actually with people that were camping out, so helped set up a campsite, and stayed maybe through the evening and then came back. I think I had goats at the time too, so twice a day milking goats. You're not far from home.
Uh-huh.
And then we had a bakers conference, I'm not sure what year, and there were whole grain baking cooperatives throughout the United States, and we had an association, and we'd conference. And one year On the Rise in Syracuse hosted the conference, and we would camp out. We camped out at the farm for 3 days and have workshops, and then the second half of the week, it was a week-long conference, we'd move into town and bake at the local bakery and have bake sales and talk about whole grains and local foods and organics. And one day we did a field trip, and all of these people from across the United States, there was probably 20 of us, 25 of us, and they wanted to go to the Women's Peace Encampment. And so we took a journey over there, and I think we just went there and spent probably a few hours and able to visit the gates and be part of it that way. So it was nice to be able to bring other people outside of the area were aware of it. This was important. This is what we're going to do on Wednesday, is go there. Kind of a little bit from the outside, coming in from the outside, as opposed to really being there inside of it. But I certainly shared a spirit with the work that was being done there. A couple of my women friends were in an affinity group, the affinity groups that had kind of started forming, and we're very committed to the Women's Peace Encampment. And I wasn't there during the event, but later they reproduced the image that was taken on a little postcard, and they're hovering. I had first-hand stories from them too, but they're hovering on they'd made it breach the fence, and we're on a landing pad, and there's a helicopter that either is just hovering over them, and you can I've never been around a helicopter, but you just feel like it's got to be the center of a hurricane or something. And they're just down and holding their ground, and this huge machine is just hovering over them, and it's just the power of that, like those two worlds were kind of meeting like that with whatever intention they had or whatever they were going to do. They just held this place for a little while, and I just found that profound, and very moving and very powerful. And I have a funny story. When I first heard about the Peace Encampment, and they had I don't know if this is a true story or not, but it sounds good. They had just come up with Live Doppler 9, and it was like this big Doppler radar beam that's on a hill up above where I live in Pompey, New York, and it scans half of the state and tells you where the rain showers are, or picks up some kind of energy. So they've gotten very sophisticated with these weather system things, and they were just getting it going, and maybe it was the first night, and it was on TV, and we were watching the weather, and these guys go, "Yep, not a cloud in the sky, nothing's happening. Oh, we just picked up a little blip from the Seneca Army Depot." And I was like, I guess thinking that they would have to block out whatever signals were coming from there were being picked up by this weather station. And I never heard it again, but it was like there wasn't anything happening. This was their maiden voyage, and they picked up something at the Seneca Army Depot. And I was like, God, what kind of radiation's coming out of what's happening? And I'm sure it's not raining there. It was in the tail end of the anti-war movement, and had kind of gotten active and started making a few connections, and the nuclear energy and the plans that they had for 5 or 6 nuclear power plants up on Lake Ontario, and there was a big 765 kV line that they wanted to put through the North Country, and it was impacting a lot of the farmers and people that had moved out onto the land in the 70s to kind of settle and live in different ways. And so the connection between nuclear energy, nuclear weapons, had all been made. I think we were also part of a Back to the Land movement that was didn't know anything else other than organic farming, so that made sense. But chopped wood, hauled water, kind of got very simple at some point. And I'd been pretty radicalized around the first oil rationing and gas rationing in the early 70s, and where maybe I used to do some recreational driving. I didn't drive. If I parked that car and stayed in one place, that was a great thing. And still kind of have that same attitude about using a car to get something, get somewhere. I think twice about it. Is this a good use of my resources and the world's resources for me to get between here and there? So I really kind of look at that. And Hiroshima and Nagasaki ending a war that way, kind of the stories that came out of there, the potential, the evolution of thought where just because you can doesn't mean you have to, so that what creative spirits we are, and that we can overcreate, and then to kind of know from there that there's some boundaries, or there's some ways that we can know things and not use them, or choose. So to choose a non-nuclear future would be to choose people's energy, really live on a whole different scale, in a whole different way. And that there's potential for that, but it has been, we're not familiar with it. I don't think we're familiar with living simply in small groups in one place. We're still hunters and gatherers, but we're travelers. We migrate. And how to have a government that's accountable and small and hormonal and transparent, that serves the needs of the people. And it's, you go back and you look at all the stories, and well, they weren't set up to do that. Governments needed to protect land. That was their role. The people kind of came second. Probably in this country, I think there was a feeling of they didn't build the 10 more plants up there. What about the waste? All of a sudden became a real problem. What about the waste? What do you mean it's a non-problem? The double speak in the language, even from the puppetry. What about the waste? It's a non-problem, So in Yucca Mountain, and just following, what they really don't know or can't know or have forgotten kind of thing. So the waste issues, and I think they kind of pulled back from that agenda. There was a feeling, at least in the 70s or 80s, that whatever the big plans were, they had their hands full with the nuclear power plants they did have. And just in the, how much our technology has been exported throughout the world, and their biggest fear is somebody else. What were you thinking? Mm-hmm. That it was going to stay in one place, and I think that proliferation on a small scale throughout the world, and this fear of other small rogue nations, being as powerful because they have access to tools that we have used. Right? We have a great T-shirt at work, and it's the weapons of mass destruction. We found them, and it's a map of the United States, and it's just got every little place in the U.S. It's a huge cache. I did participate in the Women's Pentagon action, and that was a profound action. I had gone down. I ended up. There was a baking collective in Washington, the Women's, I can't remember their name, but Women's Baking Collective or something like that. And so instead of going to the demonstration, I went to the bakery to work with them because they were planning to bring lunch stuff over at noon to the Pentagon. And so kind of came in with them. And here was this death march with the drum of a whole procession moving through Arlington Cemetery. Arlington Cemetery surrounds the Pentagon. Is that embarrassing or what? It is exactly what it is, and so they did this grieving death march coming in, and then wailing and putting down the grave markers. And then, you wailed and you cried and you let go, and then you just got so angry. And the anger just rose up out of everyone. And that ran. I don't think I could talk for 2 weeks afterwards. But they orchestrated an emotion through stages that could lead to empowerment. Because I think if you rage and you rage well, you change. And you take charge of the situation, and you move on in a new place. It's a very good little theatrical piece they moved everybody through. And at some point encircled the Pentagon, holding our scarves and strings, but really take the toys away from the boys. I just, remember just going on and on and on, but just feeling so... And I realized that these actions were not to change them particularly. They don't understand what's going on. Maybe it changes them, but man, does it change us. I think we're very different after we do things like that. we came away winning and in charge in some way. And mythical maybe, or, foolish. I don't know, healing happens on a really small scale. There was certainly a strong feminist, but mixed sexes activity at the Peace Council. The bakery started with 3 women and 1 man, Steve, and evolved into all women there, and at some point it became very important to everybody else but me to be an all-women's baking collective. And I had this, I don't know, nobody told me I couldn't do it kind of thing. I don't know if I want to tell anyone else they can't do this. And for me, I was just happy. I think we've created an environment like peppermint. We just command the space. We don't need to come out as all women doing this. And I'd already chosen food as the politic. I could stump and talk to anybody about the wholeness in food, the freshness in food. There was something there that I knew intimately, and the politics of women, or the separating out for growth and learning and empowerment, that I hadn't gotten there yet. I hadn't seen that separating out at this point would be a good thing for us. And it turns out to be, there were 9 women around the table. I conceded to, and it was a lot of younger women that wanted to be a women's baking collective. And so we made that decision. And it was a fabulous experience. I wouldn't have traded it. I was glad to have been... I couldn't defend it at the time. It was... You guys, we're building the new world. This is the trenches. Let's not get picky. If anyone wants to do this work, I don't care where they're coming from. And there were a lot of men, much like Walter was talking about, that came and did support work, volunteered, helped us in lots of different ways. But the decision-making was among the women. And it's amazing how many women have not, at least in this group, had not had to make decisions. But we created a very fabulous environment where very quickly you felt like you were part of something that was bigger than all of us put together. That there was a synergy there, and we lasted about 20 years, which was a good thing. And Syracuse Culture Workers, we're a small publisher, and Dick Cool is the owner of the business, and I met him when I was volunteering at the Syracuse Peace Council, and he was on staff there, and one of the projects he started was an annual peace calendar. And when he did his first calendar, I don't know if he knew he was going to do one the next year, blah blah blah, but I was kind of had come out of a BFA and working on an MFA in illustration and advertising at Syracuse University. And it was very clear I did not want to take those skills and plug them into a Madison Avenue or any kind of corporate structure. I appreciated kind of the power of communication and image making. And so we started working at the Peace Council and started working on the calendars there. And after we lost money maybe 3 or 4 years in a row, the Peace Council as a group decided that they could not continue to publish this calendar. We weren't making money. And Dick had made such a commitment to it that at one point he and I decided that if the Peace Council didn't want to publish it, then maybe we would start the Syracuse Culture Workers Project. And the name, I think, came out of some of the progressive stuff in Nicaragua, where they really had a minister of cultural work, and cultural work was kind of defined in some way. That culture's not just something that's laid on top of you. It's your heart and soul and community moving forward and embracing the foods and mores and customs that you want and dressing the way you want. It's got a lot of components to it. And so we started the Syracuse Culture Workers Project in 1982 around his kitchen table, and our first poster was a big dandelion, and it was Disarmament Now poster in 8 languages with a great poem on it about I want to die a natural death like a dandelion seeding in the fall, and I just want to be part of the natural world. So it was that poster. And at the time, maybe I'd already started working in the bakery, and I ended up just kind of a volunteer cultural workers working on the calendars until 20 years after, when we closed the bakery. I kind of turned up back at cultural workers to work there again. So it's been nice. But we kind of publish, we call it Tools for Change right now, and the calendar is full of people's history annotations. Chernobyl's on there, 3 Mile Island's on there every year. I mean, it's just one of those. They're not kind of treated as holidays, but these are Earth Days too.
Yeah.
April 22nd is Earth Day. 3 Mile Island is an Earth Day. These are Earth holidays that make us become more global citizens in ways. Yeah. The women's movement, and being supportive of the voice of women, and feminist ecology, and children, honoring girls, honoring boys, celebrating the whole boy, kinds of products. Started making, Jan Phillips worked there for a number of years, and we started making a women artist date book. So it's a small date book, and again, a fabulous tool for thinking forward in your life, and great poetry and nice art, and have a kind of a nice event pulling that together every year. Lots of U.S. out of Iraq stuff right now. We produce poster leaflets that can be inexpensively passed out, or signs people can hold in rallies. So kind of tools that validate and inform the movement. At some point, Dick Cool wanted to do a How to Build Community poster, and I was like, oh God, that's a stupid idea. How to build community, and yet here was this ubiquitous word, community, and people kind of didn't know what it meant. I mean, what it meant, but it hadn't been articulated. And so we started it as a calendar piece, and great big brainstorms. We have things, pages all over the wall, and people are writing what it means to build community, and some are funny and some are really serious. And most of it sounded like a lot of hard work, build a ramp for wheelchairs, not that it's not a good way to build community, but it's, in a inspiring, is this inspiring or what? And in the 11th hour, it started out with this, turn off your TV, leave your house, and da-da-da-da, sit on your porch, look up when you're walking, greet people, put up a swing, ask young people to help, turn up the music, turn down the music, and just to bake a cake and share. And it turned out to be a fabulously popular, crossing boundaries. I mean, it wasn't just feeding a movement, it was feeding, a culture in a nice way. And we've sold 10,000 of them, I think, posters. So there's a few things that we do that really celebrate and honor who we are, as opposed to being just against what we don't like. And so I think it's that building of culture and being able to build and resist at the same time. So the Syracuse Peace Council is the oldest autonomous community-based peace organization in the United States. I think it was started in 1936 with conscientious objectors and Quakers. And when I got involved, it was kind of in the mid-'70s, and 2 housemates I had were helping do a peace calendar cover. They were doing some of the lettering on the cover of this peace calendar, and I remember seeing the newsletter, and I had all these puppets, and I'd just gotten laid off a job too, and I kind of turned up on the doorstep at the Peace Council with my suitcase full of puppets and my drawing pens, and I'm here. And I think I spent the next 2 years just really going in there and thinking it was a job or something, and was just incredibly welcomed into this great community of people that were working for peace and social justice in the world. And a lot of it was against a war that was now over. This was probably 75, 76. but got involved there with the anti-nuclear movement. And it was great environment. There was probably 4 or 5 people on staff, and the newsletter always needed someone to draw a picture, so I was kind of the only one willing in the group to draw the picture. So in their archives are a lot of my little drawing the picture, and we'd all work together. I remember there was this room upstairs to get this monthly newsletter out. It seemed it had to be done in a 24-hour period throughout the whole night, and then you leave at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to the printer. I mean, I don't. It's changed now. It's changed because computers, one person can do it. But before, you needed 8 people, a couple people typing, proofreading, drawing pictures, pasting, rubbing down the transfer type. And so that kind of community and working together and struggling together with kind of the logistics of a local community organization. I think the people there that were getting paid were maybe getting $60 a week, maybe, but it served my need to, I think we grow up and we go to school and then we go to our job and then we go to school and then we go to our job, and so I needed to get up and go. I don't quite need to do that anymore. I can stay home now. But, and it was where I learned a lot. I think there was such compassion for how little we did know about the world. And so people would be talking about something happening in the Middle East or the Palestinians or what was happening here. And I had no fear of going, well, who are the Palestinians? And I could ask those questions, and I could get, there was an appreciation that we were so insulated in what we did know, so you weren't made to feel stupid. It was just almost a confirming that we knew so little, and that we had to be willing to ask for the stories and tell the stories to each other. Wow. And so it was quite an educational place. It was very supportive and educational, and continued to work with them. Well, once I started doing what I wanted to do, and realized that came early. That came in college, I think. It was like, man, if you're not doing what you want to do, you're not going to run into anybody else doing what they want to do. And the world will get really messed up quick. There's lots of people out there not doing what they want to do. And I don't know how that gets defined. I certainly appreciate the privilege of going to school, the ability to choose to work hard for a living and not get paid, But I also saw it as a great opportunity to be part of where I think change is. And the best thing about the bakery, a 6-year-old could come in and participate in that workplace. And it wouldn't take you any longer to do what you had to do. And to have children in a workplace detoxes immediately. Whatever you brought to the door, children kind of mitigate it. And then young homeschoolers started turning up there to have their math lesson and run the store. And my sister and her 4 kids would come, and it was always to plug all of them into working in the bakery, and spending a day at the bakery. And so it was just great having a workplace that was kind and gentle to people.